All right, welcome and thank you everyone for joining the Internet of Value Foundation New York, episode 72. And for all of those who come and listen to the information in the future, I hope every individual who listens to it, not only today and this year, but even possibly hundreds of years in the future, finds this information just as valuable as I do. I know every day the diverse amount of mindsets and perspectives that come in here. But Shellfish, welcome up, and Dazzling. Welcome to the space, Zara, Duck, and Up. I'm going to be quiet for a moment unless you have something you'd like to talk about, Shellfish. I'm going to send some invites out and put some information above that we could speak about today.
No, I'll send some invites out too. Maybe I can get some more people in.
GM, everyone. I was going to say, Death, it was a kind of perfect transition from that space. I believe FinTech is hosting. They were talking about, for anyone that wasn't in there, about, kind of government taxes, and then they transitioned into blockchain. And it was kind of funny because I remember from yesterday that was kind of going to be Sierra's, continuation from yesterday's conversation. So I thought that was quite ironic.
It was quite ironic, actually. I agree. Just listening to the conversation, I was like, well, this is a perfect thing to listen to segue right into governance, specifically because they were talking about how illogical or the way that money moves throughout our political system in the means of distribution through local and state, and the way that taxes are done. We really don't have any knowledge of how this money truly does move around and where the values are shifting. So something like having a blockchain where there could at least be an easily accessible way to when the thought of a financial institution or somebody who is an elected official is doing something malicious with the funds that they were not supposed to do, it's easily proven. And they were making an interesting point where, in the sense of this shift, the incumbents would be the politicians, right, or those who are in the places of high interest, which have the ability to make these actions, which are malicious or, even not thought about malicious, have these very high instances of repercussions that would occur from their actions. It's definitely going to be a long road in the sense of getting these systems administered into the places they would need to be, in these autonomous applications that could be interconnected between all of us as individuals as a whole. and I mean this in a global setting, as everything I really tried to speak to is more of a global mindset, because I look at us as one species, and if we are able to achieve change as a species in an instance, I think it's much larger to me than domestically, if we do something here, or if something changes in China or Russia domestically.
So we were talking just a few hours ago about, or touching on, with AI replacing jobs and, all the rest of it. So it's kind of looking like, because we all know humans make mistakes, and that's okay, because we learn from them and we are human. But an algorithm doesn't really make a mistake unless there's a bug in the code. So that's why it's kind of safer to have autonomous cars driving around and things like that. You can have less accidents and things. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. So you can kind of see where the kind of, with the corruption and with politicians, could you see a world where you start stripping away politicians, start pulling them back and replacing them with these kind of systems, because then you're dealing with a lot of economic activity as well. So then you've got this new financial system going with that as well in tandem. Is that kind of the world that you see us kind of going to?
Yeah, and I think you articulated it in a very beautiful manner, with the thought of the biggest change that would need to be taking place is the actual incumbents are removed eventually. That most likely being the longer tier process on the actual changes that I think will occur in the system, though I do think it be the end of the road in my personal opinion. I wish Chris was in here right now. Maybe he'll come in a little bit. I sent him an invite. But, going to like the kind of thought of Star Trek, right, of how this distributed system of information is done equally on this level playing field throughout all of the federations that agree upon working together. I look at our species as no different than this type of federation, although there be different instances of beliefs all over our planet of these different geological locations. That aside, if we are able to place these autonomous systems in between one and us another as agents, I think you could take a lot of bias out of all the decisions that's made as well. And so, remove a lot of the fraud that exists, remove those who may have bias towards one decision or the next, increase in efficiencies. At the same time, you're able to interconnect us in an interoperable way from a governance standard, if wanting to be applicable internationally, multi-internationally, global, and then hopefully beyond that, multi-planetary. And I went a little deep in my thought there. I'm sorry, Dazzling. Anyone else, though? For Hire, welcome up. And Sarah, Shellfish, Vet, if you guys want to speak, please feel free to share your thoughts.
Hey guys, yeah, I didn't want to miss this one here, so I'm up here with you all.
Yeah, definitely dig deeper into this thought of universal basic income also in the chat today. If we can, I'd like to see all of these different methods that we can think of to kind of describe a system where money is not what is valued, and so the thought of the basic necessities for us to live being applicable for everybody on the species, right? All this level playing field being for everybody. What, and anybody in the audience also, if you guys don't want to come up, you can type it in the bubble. What type of system could you use to describe this in a world where the majority of people have the choice, if they truly want, to actually go out and do some sort of fruits of labor that would produce efficiencies and benefit society, or they can still live comfortably if they decide not to. Universal basic income being really the hot word at the moment that describes some sort of system like that. When we have little pieces of this that already exist in our society, like unemployment and different disability benefits that exist, but something beyond that, not where it is able to be taken advantage of and in some sense malicious towards some individuals, but this kind of base system for all of our species. UBI soft. NY, I'd love if you could give an explanation on that, on why that term, UBI soft. I don't know. What do you guys think?
What is UBI soft?
Ubisoft, is that the game company?
Well, I mean, that is NY Crypto's comment under the space on of the question I just asked, and which every instance of anything you guys say is valid, right? I just want to see different thoughts, because Chris really got me yesterday when I'm personal, the one, right, where AI above really doesn't mean to me artificial intelligence. I think of it as augmented intelligence, and I don't even know if that really is the best terminology to kind of describe some of the tools that are used today. But
I don't think augmented, because you have to be augmenting a base of something. So what are you exactly augmenting? So that's probably not the right terminology for it, because you're not augmenting anything, are you?
you are augmenting electromagnetic frequencies in this digital display. You could think of it as almost in a different dimensional state, right? When we use computers, when you look at your computer screen, I mean, what dimensional state is the information inside of it being processed? I think it's interesting when you think about it like that. However, going back to what Chris had said, made me think about UBIs as just this term that we use, being a horrific term that it really does not please individuals to even hear it, and I agree, because you think about how some of these types of instances exist today. I keep saying the word instance, actually, that's interesting. But how some of these concepts already exist today are used in malicious ways, and they don't really benefit everyone as a whole. So how can we do things a little bit differently, but long term?
Well, we've explored in here, if you want to call them the 7 deadly sins, right, or signs, with greed and anger, and I don't know, maybe pride is one of them as well. If you kind of explore the fact that nobody, well, not nobody, but a lot of people don't want to hand out. They have big egos as well. And the words UBI, like you said, can be a hang up. Just like, unfortunately, when people get hung up on the whole term of marriage, right? Like, people relate it to like a religious like construct, and just by saying it's a union or a communion, it takes on a different denotation, right, or connotation. So same thing with UBI, I think. Just changing the terminology is going to be okay. Like, I mean, look at if you kind of take what we do in cryptocurrency, and we're able to take our money and hold on to it and wrap it and make possibly more money from it. It's teaching us to use our money a little bit wiser. Isn't that, in a sense, a type of UBI?
So yes and no. Today's how universal basic income is, as we see it, maybe. But thinking about this long term, where money really isn't a necessity in the most, right? If 90% of jobs, 95% of jobs, and I truly do believe this, in the next 15 to 20 years will be completely replaced by autonomous systems and robotics that use batteries, right, that need to be charged possibly once a day, maybe twice a day, and they last for 20 to 30 years off of somewhat of a reasonable priced fee to have the unit put together. Labor and a lot of the jobs that would exist today aren't going to exist today, and so the thought of when I kind of am trying to describe the system, how do you describe a system where everyone has, I guess I would say, base equality and base equity in the system that exists, and the choice to participate or not is really a choice. However, it doesn't have any monetary repercussions if you do not. You deserve the same ability to survive, eat, have food, shelter, electrical, as every other being in your species does. I'm trying to like echo out how do we change a term, or how do I easily replicate a term that people who know what universal basic income is but hear this term will kind of think of it as similar but disassociate it with actually like universal basic income. Go ahead, Meta, and thank you for raising your hand.
Thank you. I was going to say the problem or the issue with universal basic income is that most people don't want to be told what to do with their money or what to do with that income. Most people like the freedom to spend it as they want. Like you said whether spending in a hotel or spending it on like a bunch of like ice cream sandwiches, they don't want to be told what to do with it. So if you put like oh, here's some money, but can only buy rations of like mayonnaise or something. I don't know, but people don't want to be told what to do. And that's the problem. So you can't put it. I mean, whatever you change, you could change the name of it, but they're still not gonna like it if you tell them what to do with it.
Well, yes, and I completely agree with you. And this is why Chris made an. This is exactly Chris's point. It shouldn't be called income because it's not income. This is just a base necessity system that allows every member of it equity in the sense that you will be able to survive, have food, water, shelter, your necessities without having to question, am I going to have a meal tomorrow? Right? Do I have enough money to pay the rent this month? I'm not even going to eat tonight because I don't even know if I will be able to pay the rent. These questions that are truly so abundant in not only us as the United States and a Western civilization, but all across our entire species, the entire world. And it really mostly comes down to those who may be somewhat a little bit greedy and logistics, because the logistical way that we do shipping today is pretty inefficient. And for hire, welcome up, man. Go ahead.
Thank you. The You're wanting to speak on a global level, which yesterday I wasn't. When I was speaking, it wasn't that I was speaking not on a global level. I was speaking either way. I was just going with the conversation that I had listened to. But what I was going to say about that was the going on the global level of UBI. Is how do you imagine it being created, implemented in operation at a global level? Because that's, regardless of technology taking us there, it's still going to be people in different geographies, different cultures, different belief systems that are going to want to put their own systems into place. And I think that's where my issue is, regardless of what you call it, is if it's top down implemented, it's a problem. And I think and that's where I see the DLT, cryptos help, and with AI helping to create the technology, and we almost can't discuss it because it's something beyond our comprehension at this point, I think. But yeah, that's what I'm wondering, is how can you how are you envisioning it being a global system?
Okay. Put yourself in these shoes for the moment, if you can envision this, right? You exist in a system where the governance is partially part of your say. You have equity in the system, as every individual will have equity in the system. And just how kind of you explained it, these distributed ledger systems, right, or these information-based systems that can communicate with each other through the devices that we hold and have that represent ourselves and our identities, whether they be pseudo-anonymous, anonymous, or public, having the ability to, in the sense of governance, when we think of this actor, right, when we think about nation state, right, and they have all of these actors who are making the actual decisions, beyond this, and this is why I really do talk, right, in a relative term. I think 30 years, I really do see our species getting to this point, and it being based off of a series of events that I think will take fold over the next 2 decades, mainly being robotics and automation systems replacing the majority of jobs that physically exist today. What do you term this type of system, they be it futuristic or somewhat thought of as a utopia to some and maybe a dystopia to others? But you, as an individual, have a governance right and have an equity right in the system. And by participating in the system, you are allotted the ability to just have survival, right, at its minimalist. Food, water, shelter, electrical means of electrical devices, the ability to actually be able to participate in the system. What do you guys term this? This is really this big question I'm trying to find. And we can talk more about the individual systems themselves if you guys would like to. I have no problem for hire. And you know, even if you want to talk short term relative, what you see possibly being implemented from the way that the systems exist today. But I still question what could we coin or term this different type of system. And Meta Man, please go ahead. You have your hand up.
Okay, I was just looking. I remember a while back. I remember like Norway would pay its citizens, I guess, the oil that they were producing, and it's called a sovereign wealth fund. So they get like a piece of the pie. And I just researched it. I said I think a year ago or something like that, they made 133. How much was it? Anyways, it's called a sovereign wealth fund, and yeah, it made 133 billion dollars. And it said that this is from 2018. They said they could have paid 25,500 for each citizen. So if you were to call it like a sovereign wealth fund, same thing, or SWF, basically like they could do what they want with that money. Why do you have to tell them what to do with it? You know, why do you have to say, okay, this voucher goes ahead, you could buy a loaf of bread? I mean, that just sounds bad. But if you put it like a sovereign wealth fund, and they get, you know, a basic income. I mean, but you're not gonna call it basic income, but it's called a sovereign wealth fund. It's like you're invest. This is what the work that you put in that country. This is what you get back. So you get $25,000 back, or whatever it is, you know.
And so in this somewhat futuristic representation of our system, albeit the payment that you make, or the real delivery that you give to the system at large, and then your equity with what it provides, is information, right? These information-based systems do not exist without us and our information. And I think that, you know, going to something Jeremy Rifkin and this 21st century, thinking about data rights and data sovereignty, I think this well embodies this type of a system being able to exist, and this being a procurement in it. Interesting though, sovereign wealth fund. I don't know if the word.
It's from Norway, and also it says. I mean, I'm thinking that you would just eliminate taxes altogether, and I guess whatever you're supposed to get goes to the sovereign wealth fund. You don't pay taxes if you make any side jobs, whatever. But you know, that's how they've been doing it for a while, dude. I remember going. Where was it at? Disney World, I think. They had a ride, like the Norway ride, whatever. They don't have it anymore. But I remember, dude, like it was, and it showed you like the history and like how they take care of their people and stuff. But anyways, yeah, cool.
You're quite funny, Meta. Go ahead, for hire, and then Dazzling.
Yeah, I think like what you're describing of the future. You know, things are going to get cheaper. Basically, essentially free. So the idea of having to pay for them, or them costing, is kind of less of an issue. So it's more of the way I see it is empowering the individuals to take advantage of the system, and to where instead of being taxed, they're being paid, because it's free. I mean, just anything they do, any little bits of work, any progress they're making, is adding value to the system, which then brings the value back to them. But money is less of an issue, because it's just not necessary, except for some, luxuries that people want, or human needs. But basically, the ideas of the way I see it, technology is just going to make it to where, for the most part, people won't have to worry about money. It's the taxes and the greed that is inherent in our current system that is creating the notions that are in our heads today.
Well said. Yes, and I only you described it very well. And I when I think of this type of system, the same thing when you think of like luxuries, or those who will go out and still try and participate in the means of trying to do something as an innovator for our species. I think the data that you provide to that system is but utmost importance and valuable. And so I don't by any means think ever that our species will ever stop exchanging value between individuals as agents. But I think the format of how we think about it does change. And Dazzling, man, go ahead and the meta.
Yeah, I mean, as far as trying to come up with the terminology for it, this kind of new system, I find it hard to believe that you could convince people that, you know, there was this other system that was being implemented, because everyone's so used to the system that they've grown up with, and everyone's so used to a centralized kind of, you know, government system, and they have been for such a long time that, you know, like, I think that, you know, they wouldn't take kindly to, you know, calling or introducing these kind of systems. I mean, unless, you know, like they're kind of already doing that in the background. I mean, half the politicians these days are, you know, actors anyway. So, yeah.
What was that last part, Dazzling? I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said that, you know, like politicians, you know, they're kind of actors anyway. So maybe, you know, they are kind of rolling out these types of systems, but, you know, because people are going to find it hard to, you know, kind of grasp the concept of this transition. You know, maybe that's why the politicians are mostly actors these days, and not actual real politicians that care about, you know, looking after people and stuff like that.
Yeah. So what For Hire was saying, like, even though you have this perfect system, there's still going to be, like we said the other day, there's still going to be people who want more. And once you have money, they want power, and they would, you know, the bad actors will do anything. You know, like we were talking. What were we talking about? Even though they're rich, they'll still steal. Even though you're poor, even the poor guy will steal. You know, so they'll still be bad actors, even in a perfect system where you have AI running things. So yeah, it was called basically it said in 1969 in Norway they found oil, I guess, somewhere, and they decided to, I guess, share it in the country some way, and just so they could stop the, you know, the fluctuation of the economy there. So it says they own 1.5% of. I was looking at it, man. It's pretty cool. But anyways, that sovereign wealth fund would be cool. But the thing is, what would be the incentive of behaving for these people?
I'd be curious what everybody's number would be to feel like they had enough. Like, what do you think
Shellfish.
the average number would be?
Shellfish. Okay, we have billionaires, right? And we have Warren Buffett, right? And we have these. Do they still have enough? No, they never have
Hold
enough.
on, hold
No,
on.
no, and so
do
this.
you think they actually go after the money, or do you think that they're really good managers and people movers?
They go after the. They go after the money, but now they go after the power. Look at the guy from Microsoft, right? He's still going, even though he could have retired and been chill. He lost his wife over stuff like this, and he's still going. He doesn't care.
It's power. It's not money necessarily.
I know, Vet. It's not all about XP Cafe.
Yeah, and so Meta, this is exactly why this type of base system, right? When nobody can hold over the fact that if they fire you, you won't have a meal tomorrow and be able to pay your rent. This changes the equity and the equality that exists inside of our system. Add autonomous representations of agents in between us without bias additives. This, you know, this thought, and of course, this is 20 to 30 years timeline thinking, but I truly see this as a much more efficient representation of what our species could be representing, with love and empathy as the backbone of that thought processing sociologically. So, and then this, you know, but as you had said, I don't think this eliminates by any means the fact that somebody can be a bad actor, and there will, or I don't even want to say bad, sorry, but malicious actor, or have a means of doing something nefarious to somebody, and this is why we have law. I mean, this should always be upheld. Your actions, you may have free speech and you may be able to perform your actions physically, but that does not mean that there will not be repercussions for actions. For every action has a reaction. And sorry, for hire. Go ahead, man. I was long-winded there.
No apologies. The way I see it, well, a lot of the ideas in our head or the experiences, things we see and around us, it's due to our system that we have and what we grew up with, what we're exposed to, and that's what everyone is experiencing now. So the future, if we incentivize a different way of thinking and create a different way of living, then a whole different mindset would be in the population. And as far as much of the malicious behavior is essentially incentivized by our system. The laws that are created are supposed to do one thing, and they create a problem that wasn't expected, or sometimes the people who created the law actually knew that's what would happen, and they're just going to capitalize on it and let everybody think that they're doing something good. But the reality is they're creating a bad situation. But I truly, from my study of people and laws and history, I believe that people are mostly good. It's just that if you don't have a good upbringing, a good educational system, you're going to have bad, malicious results. And I think that's the thing is that if we create a system, and I think the system needs to be decentralized, that that incentivizes positive behaviors from people, then we're probably going to go in a better direction from here than where we were. But who knows? We have to get there to find out.
No, very, very well said, for hire. In the theory of the game, the most important aspect of changing any means of the theoretical game is the incentive behind the structure of the sociological means of interactions, right? Just as you had said it, and I would completely agree. Although I wouldn't say that laws are strictly, not every law. I mean, there are a lot of things law over time has developed because one individual did something that was horrific and malicious, and then we created a law for that, and then somebody said, "Oh, I can use that law in this way, so let me do that," and then so it's almost like we're really good at taking advantage of horrific situations at moments, and I definitely give our species that for sure, because we seem to just all be very applicable in that situation. However, I completely agree with everything that you were saying, so I love it. Meta Man, though, go ahead, man.
I think Shellfish had her hand before me. She can go ahead.
No, it's okay. I actually pulled it back down. Go ahead, Meta.
All right. Start ladies first. But anyways, except for my sister, I'm first. But I was gonna say there has to be some sort of fail safe, right? You know how like we have now, supposedly we're supposed to have checks and balances in our government, right? But like there has to be some sort of fail safe within an AI system if it's an autonomous thing where we follow laws autonomously. Because sometimes, like in the past, we've had laws that were inhumane, like really ridiculous laws that were very bad for, if you want to say in general, humankind. We've changed that. So what if you make these laws in the future that are autonomous and it's AI upholding these laws and you can never change it? So what would be the failsafe?
A nuclear bomb, Meta. No, I don't think that's the future that we're going towards by any means, where you don't have say in this autonomous representation of a system that exists, right? The system that exists that I think of is built in the sense of governance. You wouldn't even need an artificial intelligence, right? Particularly to run the system, right? The artificial intelligence or the tool set that would be used would just be a means of being able to either increase the communication efficiencies or just be able to distribute information in a means of non-biased formats. Other than that, things like blockchain, ZK rollups, all smart contracts, all these different types of application setups go into that type of governance system. not the robot that controls us all. Although, I'm not also against it at the same time, right? Because there's nothing that says that an autonomous system won't do what's in the best nature of what it thinks for us, and then that's a question of representation of what does it think of us.
I mean, let's just say like you walk into a store and these doors like lock automatically, and it shows like a red light, you can't walk in there because you didn't follow the law. So everywhere you go, you can't walk in through those doors. So you're stuck outside because you did not follow the law.
I mean, that's possible today, and I mean we have a very good example of how things can be used in a very horrific way. Unfortunately, the CCP, right? And so we have an opportunity viewing that to make a different decision on the policies and the way that we governance our law. I mean, the system does not exist without us.
Do you think that it's possible to, not have a big government, but an individualized government, like down to, if we can have marketing at an individual level, why couldn't we have a governance that pertained to each person that had rails?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I think
sorry.
government and no, I agree. I think government and governance over time definitely becomes much more localized, becomes much more easy to have the representation of what is actually occurring and who you're voting for and what are the means of the systems that they're going to want to put in place before these policymakers are kind of able to be fully replaced by these autonomous systems. But yeah, I do think in the short term, that's definitely what starts to play out.
It just comes back to accountability, governance, self-governance.
Accountability is a huge governance or government issue, I think, and it really just goes down to the way that the incentive behind the sociological means of the interactions we have every day with each other have played out over the course of history. However, today, a much more kind representation of that than when it maybe was 500 years from now, but it's still not acceptable by any means of what a lot of people would agree with and what they would like to see in society. Meta, though, go ahead. Unless Shellfish, unless you...
no, I think For Hire was before me.
Thank you very much, Meta. Go ahead, For Hire, and then you can speak, Meta.
Thank you. Let's see if I can relate this story. I think it plugs in a little bit here. It's an economics book I read, and it had a story to try to explain economics in a simple way. But it was talking about essentially how do you devalue the life of a police officer, and what it talked about was passing a law that if a drug dealer was caught with a firearm, it was death penalty, capital punishment, which meant that any police officer who found an armed drug dealer would get shot dead because, the drug dealer didn't want to get the death penalty. So that was, it was a very blunt way of describing, it was to explain economics, but it, I think, makes a point of how laws can have unintended consequences that, people often say, we should put these people to death. They always think that way. But yeah, you have to look at all the different angles of what you're doing. And I think that's where a lot of people, like I was saying yesterday, about people jump on one side or the other, and they've got to really look at the different, the spectrum of things. But yeah, I don't know. I forget how I was going to try to plug that in better, but yeah.
No, it was well said, and I completely agree. Yeah, you said it yesterday, right? There are no sides. It's everything is, and I can look at this as this representation of this polarities of difference between sociological thoughts. If you look at a string, there are two different sides of the string, both with different polarities of that thought. However, the string is still just a string, right? And so, in that sense, right, we all are still just one. It's just we create this division between our thought. And Elephant Man, welcome up. I'm so glad you're here, and you got your hand up, so please feel free to speak.
Thank you. I was just looking at the when you talk about UBI, and how that works. I mean, and you gave the Star Trek reference was given, and I totally understood that, and where with the Star Trek analogy, there is a prime directive. So there's the governance of how everything will be, um, you know, what type of law and order will exist is pretty much there. Only thing that I know that from that framework is there's the question of obsolescence. You know, there's the question of obsolescence in regards to um, what you have to offer, what what is deemed obsolete. Because there is a what's good for the state type attitude that comes along with that. We can see it play out already in society today. There's with AI, there are some things that will become obsolete, and so the other part of that question is then what does this do to like free thinkers? What does this do to innovation? Now, there's an innovation that exists as far as like technology, but then there's the other side of the innovation that exists as far as creativity. So creativity becomes, the fields of creativity can become obsolete because you can actually replace. I mean, you can replace an actor, right? You can replace a writer. Those type of formal, you know, Pose and Proust type, professions. And then at the same time, you can look at UBI as like the military, for example. You know, I can be a private in the military, right? And the income is the same across the board, across the spectrum for a private, uh, whether I'm a military police officer, whether I'm a infantryman in the field or grunt, whether I'm in communication or whatever. So then that kind of what it kind of ushers in is a rank and file system. It kind of ushers in that type of you know real world uh, you know way of life. In the sense that your value is associated with what you had to offer, and then also I'm gonna try to take a jab at MetaMan right quick. So then um, you work, you do your job for so long, and then you retire, you get a pension, and you take a crap on the beach. I hope you caught that, MetaMan.
Sorry, say that again.
I say you do your job for so long, you get a pension, and then you take a crap on the beach.
You take a crap on the beach.
Yeah, you made that statement. You made that statement a couple of rooms back. I've been meaning to get back to you because the AARP organization wanted me to make
Oh,
sure I check
yeah, yeah. I think I,
make sure I
yeah,
make sure I
yeah.
check you on that.
That kind of sounds like my kind of nonsense. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's just my take on it though.
I mean that. Yeah, you're right about that. I mean that's funny because yeah, you do all this work. Yeah, then you just like you're at the beach and you can't move nowhere and you're done.
Well, you say you're done. I didn't really, I took that to heart a little bit. I work,
Oh,
I
I'm
work,
sorry about that.
I, I work for my picture that I can still go to the beach and I don't have to take a crap. But anyway, that's a different story.
I mean, I just meant like you're not gonna work in life. I mean, you're not gonna basically you're just working for years.
No,
And
no, no. I get it, man. It's a whole new different mindset.
yeah, I'm just
I'm
a
just,
spoiled brat. That's
I'm
why.
just, I'm just, I'm just, I'm just. I think that in the millennial mindset, not working for like 20, 30 years is a good idea. I mean, that's a great idea if you can. Hey, I mean, we all work with the tools that we had. But anyway,
Well, like that's saying like we're getting to a point where like was it like 80% of the jobs, 90% we're gonna be able to not have to take a crap on the beach. We could all just sit around and like do stuff we really
How
want to
about
do.
this? How about this?
but
This will be
that
the deal
that
for you
that
guys.
that promotes that.
If you decide to do it,
That
just dig a hole in
that
the
is
beach,
another
okay?
problem
Make
in
sure you
itself
bury it.
because there is a balance between being able to not sit around and do whatever. What's the incentive to get out of bed at a certain point? However,
Exactly.
I mean, but the bigger issue is, to me, is that the obsolescence factor, and you know, a librarian. Okay, they can become obsolete. Librarians can become obsolete, and some would argue for the need of a librarian, not so much as just for the historical value or something like that. So those are the kind of things that I think about, because I think it could stagger the the um, the creative mind, in opposed to just kind of, it becomes a factory of like, hey, let's roll out this, and this is what you're going to do. I mean, just like in like certain third world countries, they tell you're going to be a doctor regardless or whatever. I don't care what you decide that you want to do. If you want to dream, it can be a dream killer. That's all I want to say.
I mean, I think I didn't phrase it well. I was probably playing around last time, but the thing is, what I'm trying to say, sorry, Death, but the thing is, how it should be phrased is like probably like hunter gatherers, would just go around trying to like, I mean, what is it called? Like, you're not farming nothing, you're just like scavenging, right? But then you realize you could farm. So once you're farming, you're making creating your own food and stuff like that. Man, you really, you have a full belly all the time and stuff, So basically, you're more calm to think, right, and do what you want to do. Same thing, I guess, like people living paycheck to paycheck, so they're not really thinking about politics or this kind of stuff going around the world. They just like worried about, their paycheck to paycheck, how to pay the mortgage, how to pay off bills. But now, when you're chill, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Then you have time to actually think of, advancing, if you want to say the human race or whatever you want to do. I mean, if you want to be lazy, that's on you. But most people don't. They want to have a purpose, and you can actually do what you love.
Now, I did argue at one time for the universal minimum wage. I thought that would be a good place to start, because then that would create the disincentive for people to cross the borders, sort of thing. So, and that would eliminate all the outsourcing, and because I saw a lot of outsourcing when in the environment that we live in the last couple of decades, whatever, there was programmers was hot, right? And we programmers thought they were gods at one time. Um, um, and so, but then they proved, in the industry, technology proved that everybody's replaceable. They put the code that people like myself and everybody that was programming and stuff like that, the code that and the stuff that we came up with, they put that on the shelf. They put that on the shelf, and programming became like obsolete. I'm like, it was like staring. I was like staring people away. No, you don't want to be a programmer. You need something that's gonna stay. That can't be exported. And then that's when I kind of went to networking. Networking couldn't be exported, but then again, it can be exported, because now you got the cloud. So what can you do?
That's what
But
they're doing with the APIs, right? With the whole, like, even like all these payment systems are using the cloud APIs. You don't have to set up the networks and stuff or worry about the hardware updating it. Just these companies have to do that.
but the only thing that, but then, well, let me just throw this little icing on the cake. The only thing that that's unexportable is security. And that was the last thing I was pushing. Whenever I tell somebody, hey, go in this direction, that direction, blah blah. And so cybersecurity is more stationary. I mean, you can, even if you um, export, or you put things on the cloud, whatever, you still have your security has to mirror the cloud. The cloud, your network, your everything has to mirror the cloud. So you still, there's some security there. And I'm just speaking in the security sense, because I came from that security area. I mean, that security of employment area, mindset. Well, so that I'm just throwing that out there. I hope I didn't turn the direction on the conversation.
No, you're fine, Elephant. Don't worry. And I'm just I'm happy you're in space. I haven't seen you in I shouldn't say I haven't seen you in spaces, but I haven't seen you in the space that I host in the last couple of weeks. So I'm glad you're here. Going back to what you had said, though, worms are so advanced today in some cases that they can even build their own virtual machine inside of an application and then delete itself when somebody goes to look for it, and so no trace in some senses. But so I don't think there's any lesson importance of cybersecurity, and I do think it's something that we working with these intelligent tool sets will be needed for a very significant period of time. Oh, Dazzling Man, you got your hand up, and then
yeah, going back to what Meta was saying, like we used all our time back in the day to kind of farm, and then now we've kind of got more time because we've got these systems in place where we don't have to spend that kind of time worrying about all those kind of things like the hunter-gatherer lifestyle and all that. What happens if we get to a point where we're so reliant on these systems and they fail us? Like what do we do then? We're kind of stuffed. And I mean, you're kind of finding that now anyway. I mean, a lot of the kids these days, they don't know where the food comes from in the supermarket. They think it comes from the bloody supermarket. And you can't, until you start telling them and breaking it down, it's like, well, cheese doesn't come from the supermarket. There's actually a process behind that. So yeah, like, and I mean, I believe you're in construction, Death, same as me, and the homes that they're building today, there's just no backyards, right? So there's no ability to kind of even not just grow your own stuff, but learn how to grow your own stuff as well, and learn how that self kind of sustainability kind of works and all that. So like, what happens in a world where these systems fail us? Like, what do we do? Are we doomed?
No, and this is why we have what we would call these external tools being produced over such a significant period of time. We produce tools, they fail us, we make them better. We produce tools, they fail us, then we make them better, we make them better, we make them better. And this is where we're at, right? This is the 21st century of all of the iterations of the tool sets that we've had previously have accumulated to this point in time. And so if the tool fails, well, we just go out and we make a better one. And, in the sense of innovators or those being able to be producing innovative ideas and concepts and materials that we utilize every day, I don't think this is ever going to be somewhat as a non consideration for what we would have as our species, even if we had tool sets that were performing the action of creating more tool sets. And I think we're okay in this means, right? Now, do we get hit by an asteroid? We have bigger issues, right? Do we have a giant EMP that hits the Earth from some sort of radiation coming off of the sun or somewhere out in the universe? Even in that case scenario, I think we're back up and running in a matter of 10 to 15 years, right? So and more advanced in the case. There's a lot of I think, regardless of the tool set failing us at one point and another, the advancements of the tool sets will not cease. And Meta, please go ahead then. And KJ, if you would like to speak after Meta, welcome up.
Oh, okay. I almost forgot what I was going to say, but I wanted to, what Elephant was saying, he just reminded me, like, and you were saying about, like, these worms, not physical worms, but like viruses, whatever it is, right? That they self-destruct. But what is to say? What if even if AI, like, could you make AI like some sort of virus where it would like confuse it into like basically changing your information and making you a criminal? And basically, people were like saying it's immutable, you can't change it, but then like you didn't do it, like what's the fail safe on that? Like, how do you check on that? You know what I'm saying? Like, it just changed the whole, like, be like, the Meta Man's a criminal in this thing, and he did this, he stole a loaf of bread, You're like in the movies where they change the information.
maybe I did not understand. Um,
Sounds like he's throwing out a Minority Report example, right? Where the immutable database, the source of truth, gets corrupted. Was that what you're trying to say, MetaMan?
Right, because AI is supposed to be like, immutable, that it knows, it has no feelings, has no emotion. It's supposed to be doing right, but some woman or guy, whatever you want to call them, found a way to like break into it and form like their own like AI to, I guess, contradict the other AI, and it confuses it and basically changes your information and turns into a criminal. And there's no way you could fight that back because you're not an IT professional, whatever. You're not into that, so you're just stuck and you're just thrown in jail.
Yeah, it's a simple way around it, and it already exists. We have quantum proof timestamps of the information of when it's produced. We already have these distributed information systems that have these types of timestamps. You put this into a level where there's cryptography that's allowing for a third-party hash to be verified and stored with the information when it's produced. Theoretically, any sort of intelligent system you have could just look back and say, well, this hash is obviously different than this hash. This information has been altered. Where is the source of the altercation? Okay, it's been altered by this source. I definitely don't trust this source of information. I voted as void. No. And this is how our species, as an interconnected, interoperable species with our devices and systems, in the form of maybe what you want to coin artificial intelligence, allows for the ability to and delete malicious information that may be used to manipulate others in the system. And so, thank you for bringing it up, Meta, because it's definitely an important.
Yeah, I just want to thank KJ for being the interpreter for what is it called, neurodivergent interpreter. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. Glad I've watched too many sci-fi movies. Hey, Death, I was thinking about this future, and then I always wonder about kind of the how in between. And then I think of the old school systems, for lack of better words, where there's some sort of fee per transaction. There's incentives that create the outcomes we've all lived through. How do we make the jump, and how do we fund and choose the best new system for humanity without a power struggle? And I imagine there'll be a power struggle leading up to that. But have you ever visioned, I guess, how we transition to more of an altruistic system, assuming enough of the good guys are steering it?
Yeah, I don't like the label good or bad because how I kind of referenced earlier, I think we just look at everything as it's just one side, and there's just different polarities or spectrums of what each individual may want to experience, which could harm another individual, unfortunately. The thought when I think about the change in this system, I reference a 25 to 30 year timeline because, just as you had said, the incumbents are those who sit in positions who don't want to be removed, whether it be industry, finance, or political. It doesn't matter the spectrum. There is going to be some sort of want to stop the change that's occurring, and we watch this over time. I mean, when we adopted electricity in the 1700s, all of those who were candle makers at the time took up in arms flames and went and tried to burn towns down, and they were upset because electricity was going to put them all out of business. Ended up being that people moved on and just discovered new things that they could do to provide some sort of efficiency for society. I think the largest force of this change that will occur is the fact that over the next 10 to 15 years, 90 to 95% of the jobs that exist today will not be applicable for us as individuals to be accomplishing anymore because of the autonomous and robotic systems that will be introduced into this. I think this slow shift forces a very strong dynamic, and especially in the course of thinking about the changes that will occur in the next 10 to 15 years, sociologically and politically in this country. Most of the politicians being over the age of 70, they will probably not be around in a decade. Not to discount any of the very old individuals in the political seats that they sit today. However, them being, if not completely replaced by autonomous systems in 15 years, but by younger individuals who have more of a understanding of the systems that exist regardless. I think this begins to force and usher in of all of these different dynamic changes in the systems because of the job loss that will occur and the uproars that will probably come from these things that will probably occur over the next
necessity will be the mother of invention is what it sounds like. Go ahead, Meta.
Thank you. Now, like going off of what KJ was saying, the struggle, because we know, like even in this country, United States, or any other country, like such as in Australia, there's a power struggle, like left, right, middle, whatever it is. There's so when you have this autonomous system, who are the good guys? Like you said, there is no good, there is no bad, because one man's good guy is another man's bad guy. So how are you gonna have how are people gonna accept a one system? You know what I'm saying? Like how would you convince a whole population that this one autonomous system is law and that's it?
Yeah, that's a better way of asking, I think, a question I was thinking of death, because even in like the OpenIA or these, whatever the abbreviation is for like the chat GPT stuff, we're all learning in real time that you get out of it what was initially programmed or put into it. How do you have a bake-off, a transparent bake-off? Is that even possible?
With time. So, as all technology is typically developed in a very centralized manner, and then as it becomes more distributed, it then becomes more decentralized. The same things, I believe, will happen with not only quantum processing and computing and these artificial intelligence tools. I really don't enjoy saying that term, but these intelligent tool systems and applications that we will build autonomously. The advancements of wanting to understand them, I think, also comes with this. And so the younger generation being the biggest target for this, also being another reason why there will be somewhat of a younger generation in the next 15 years inside of the seats that will make a huge difference in the actual ability to change some of the way that the governance structures exist today. Regardless, I could put this in somewhat of an easier layman terms. It truly does not matter what the incumbents or those who sit in positions that do not want to be removed want. The occurrence of these distributed systems of information already exist and are only becoming more abundant. And with them doing so, the days are limited where those who sit in positions to take malicious action have the ability to do so. And Elephant, please, man, go ahead. I saw your hand up, and Sierra.
I was going to try to answer that question. I think it just kind of becomes more of like a Hippocratic oath, where we do no harm. In the same vein, it's like when you go back to the Star Trek analogy, it's a prime directive where you don't interfere, that sort of thing. That's the universal concept, the universal structure of how we're going to enact, how we're going to role play with this particular technology. It'll be a consensus of thought, but in those consensus of thought, I think the highest order will probably be some type of prime directive or some Hippocratic oath where we do no harm, and it's agreed upon universally.
I love it, Elephant, and that's exactly when I speak to the sociological means of the agreement of society, empathy and love. That exact right. That what was the term you had used? The directive, right? And it is a good term, actually. Maybe I'm going to adopt something.
I think you said prime directive.
The prime directive, yeah. So
Optimus prime directive.
I had a feeling you were going to do that. But this thought of this, at least this base agreement, right? Do no harm. Don't always think of like right. We've had this like thought about for such a significant period of time, even our species, the 10 Commandments, all of these different the sutras of the Pandanjali and the Bhagavad, that these kind of interpretations of right of just this like base understanding of we are all one, right? There's no reason to cause such malicious harm in our directive of at least interacting with each other. I mean, it's not efficient either. Sierra, though, please go ahead and speak.
Thank you. This is just such an exciting topic for me because it's something I spend a lot of time like daydreaming about. So I love to hear all of the different ideas being shared. I'm going to, I guess, ping off of a little bit of what Meta said, but also Elephant. I love that you used the word consensus because I think consensus should be at the heart of this type of environment. And it's very accessible today through DAOs. When we talk about autonomous systems, Death, you mentioned that we're not necessarily talking about robotics autonomous systems, just systems that function without needing human interference. But if we set parameters where things did need to be set to a vote or a consensus agreement by all that are participating in whatever that DAO pertains to, because I guess to kind of answer Meta's question, it wouldn't be one. I don't picture it as being one organization. I think it's a transition of economy and how we do business on a global scale. And I think it just rids the need for government at a lot of different levels, especially if you think about starting locally in your community. If we all only focused on the areas that we lived in this, and I get so hesitant to talk about this because it feels so like totalitarian and utopian and dystopian. I'm not really sure, just unlike how we live today. But COVID, for me anyway, made me become a lot more active in my local community and also realize how much there is that I can utilize in my local community. I started shopping more locally and supporting local businesses. And I feel like if we at a global scale just operated on the general like consensus of whatever was best for our community, we already kind of live in a subscription-based society. You can subscribe to the beliefs that you want to. I think that these types of DAOs would be participation-based. So if you have them for educational purposes or different industry specifics like farming and agriculture, etc., then consensus would be agreed upon between the participants of those groups. This got pretty long-winded, so apologies. I hope I didn't lose everyone. I see hearts, so I don't know if that means I did or did not. But the last thing that I want to mention is the idea of a liquid democracy. I'm not sure if it's a term that anyone has heard before, and I don't really like any of our current terminology for governance to be applied in these situations, but it's something that exists that I think could be modeled on and built off of. In a liquid-based democracy, everybody gets a vote, but you can choose to delegate your vote. I see this working really well in a DAO type structure where we're governing based on like purpose and principle of the DAO, where you can either choose to vote yourself on relevant things, or maybe you want to delegate your vote to someone that you trust that is more knowledgeable than you on the topic, which I imagine over time, maybe like organizations would form, and you can delegate your vote to an organization and say, you know what, the such and such Department of Agriculture knows what's best for that, so I'm going to let them have my vote on that, or whatever it may be, and I will land my ship there.
It's interesting. It's a term I haven't heard used before. Liquid democracy. I thank you for speaking, Sierra. NY, I am trying to bring you up, man. I don't know what is going on. Is it working now? Are you up here? Yeah, it looks like you're up here.
Love what you shared, Sierra. Thoughts and prayers for the lobbyists and the overpaid politicians.
Right, and and even going take it maybe even just 10 years in the future, right, when distributed ledger systems and blockchain is much more integrated into the way that we can do governance and voting in general. I think it's very cool to think that your politician that might be going out and lobbying could easily be prevented from accepting funds in the form of, right, what if BlackRock wants to be a donor? Okay, well, so everybody in your local region has voted that you are only allowed to accept $15,000 for BlackRock next year, not 2 million. Sorry, right? Like the actual means of a fair participation and those who could lobby, right, and pay for some sort of participation without having to fork over. I mean, right, the amount of money that's spent on lobbying every year is just a tremendous amount. Much more fair representation, I think, just right off the bat, just something simple like that. So yeah, I love that concept. Meta, did you have your hand up though? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to say, would you? Hold on, give me one moment. Would you want to, I guess, create like some sort of identity, like a different identity for people in politics, where you could follow up on what they're receiving and what they're spending?
Can you say that again?
Sorry, man. Basically, creating, if you're going to be into politics, right? Just to see what kind of funds you're receiving and what are you spending, they would have to keep tabs on your expenditures, and that would be like on the blockchain, like some sort of cryptocurrency where you'd follow, what they spend. It's like they should make rules where if you're in politics or you're in Congress, you should not be able to, get in the stock market because you get the heads up what to do. Just like what's that woman? Anyways.
I mean, they're still just voting on that, right, to make it illegal for politicians to be able to buy and sell stocks, which is
Yeah. Same thing
with
with crypto, right? Like these guys, they got the heads up on crypto too. They could go ahead and buy, play a game, even with Ethereum, and then now, all of a sudden they made their money. Now let's go ahead and do regulations.
Yeah, interesting reference to what you're kind of saying, Meta. Not that I don't like JFK Jr. However, he made it clear that he holds at least $500,000 of Bitcoin, and then he says he's going to replace the United States dollar with Bitcoin as the world reserve currency. I was like, well, that's a little bit in your self-interest there, man. I was like, that's kind of obvious.
Isn't that kind of hypocritical? Because they said the even like not to be like Elon Musk's like friend or something, but I'm just saying, like, he talks about Dogecoin, and then they say, oh, he's self-interest and he can talk about it in his platform and stuff like that, and that's like basically like inside of trading sort of thing. But this dude's coming out and saying Bitcoin is good and stuff, like same thing. He's pumping Bitcoin.
Just actors doing their job. Somebody had their hand up though beforehand. I am so sorry.
I think Sierra was going to help answer that question. Right? Feel free to jump in, Sierra, if you want. It seems like he's along your thread still.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. I was going to jump in, and then I put my hand down because I lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys.
I think. Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if you were going to go where my mind went. Is that we kind of like make politicians less and less relevant. So it's not even so much of like auditing them. It's that you don't need a human to carry out the wishes of what the society is voting to direct our funds or whatever, or support whatever it might be. The one question I'd have is, how do we create legislation? And that would be an interesting. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that.
Yes, I've thought about this a lot, right? Because this is a very large question, right? So how do bills actually get passed, and how do we not just have this like monkey of a system where people are just throwing things in there and all of a sudden 500 people vote that, and the law is you can now walk around with like a monkey on your back or something, right? Like something just very strange things, right? I think it starts from what had Elephant had kind of mentioned before, right? This like prime directive, where we all can agree on this basis set of rules and rights and and law that we're going to establish. Beyond that, we can then vote on very minuscule like little changes. Right? Things like voting on a road, the speed limit. Should a stop sign be here? Where should funds be allocated? Is it more important, to do this for the town that year, right? Because things, even locally today, not many people participate in even the town voting that goes on. It just, especially if you didn't even grow up in the town, sometimes it feels just very strange wanting to try and participate.
But that's what these politicians want, is you not to participate. But if you put it on the blockchain, then everybody can participate.
If you make the ability to vote and to have decision making done from a physical electronic device, then yes, I completely agree. The incentive behind voting, I think, would change for a lot of people, and the actual participating too, to make it a little easier. But Sierra, go ahead.
Thank you. In my mind, I guess I am thinking about it a little bit farther down the road when politicians, as we know and understand them today, really become less relevant. When we're governing based on like purpose-built, I don't feel like I'm explaining this well. If we use very narrow focus DAOs, where, for instance, Death just mentioned roadways, so I'll take that as an example, where participation in it would be like an actual roadway construction DAO, and the only thing governed by that body would be pertaining to that. And this is where I think the delegation of like a liquid-based democracy comes in handy, or could be exciting, because like for instance, I like the car thing, I'm going to run with it. I don't know much about cars. I have a car guy. Whenever I have any problems with my car, if it makes a weird sound or anything, I have a guy that I call. I trust him. He tells me what to do. He's usually right. He's my car guy. I would totally delegate any of my, I don't know, vehicle, like in my personal life, my vehicle decisions to this human. Why would we not do the same on an industrial level? Like, politicians really become unnecessary when we have specialized industry leaders running their area of expertise. Like, what is the role of a politician? It's really just like motivated business people at that point. They're going to put their message in front of you because they want to work with you through whatever the incentive structure we design is. And I just don't see politicians existing the way that they currently do in this theoretical future.
Get in there, Four High.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, thanks. Sierra brought it, this discussion where my mind sees a lot of this in the future, the way I've been envisioning it for a long time, as far as using technology to streamline and make politics, to make it work, to get rid of politics, but make that public service, to make the point of it work for us. And blockchain makes it honest, public, immutable records that can't be messed with by money interests, and since people don't get involved, because really almost anybody can get elected to local office. All they have to do is run and then talk to a few people and get some votes, and unless there's a real interest in a position, anybody can pretty much get elected. It's just people don't, because they're not interested. But yeah, the technology is going to take us to where we don't need it's localized. We don't need national governments and things for a lot of stuff, and a lot of things can be automated to where we won't need to have these decisions made and have voting all the time. And when we do need it to be voted, then it's just something that people do, and essentially, I think voting, you get paid to vote or incentivized to where you want to take part because it benefits you. And if you say it's not interesting to me, I don't care, well, you're losing things. And once you recognize you're losing things, you're going to go, I need to get involved. And I mean, I think it's less a decision. It's more just the kind of forced without it being at the barrel of a gun. More of just, you're like, oh, I have to do this. Part of the process.
Seems kind of like a Captain Obvious moment, but as we're talking through this, it sounds like there's a general consensus that government should run more like a tech company than government. And everything we're talking about, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how like badass tech companies roll. You have subject matter experts, you have visionaries, they're tied with rock star programmers like Vet. Then, everyone like brings their area of expertise to a centralized hub. There's some sort of executive review, and you can automate a lot of that. I'm not saying that big companies don't have inefficiencies as well, but it sounds like we all just want our government to run like almost like a for-profit or a for-us entity versus itself.
A sovereign welfare fund.
Well, the only thing I say, the government does run like a business, but it's more of a family business because it takes care, or it's set up and designed in such a way that it doesn't leave out the unfortunates. There's a place, somewhat of a stake for the unfortunates. Other than that, I think business can be kind of cutthroat and ruthless, so it would leave out those unfortunates and stuff like that. And then I was thinking about also the governance thing, where in order to get to that universal consensus of a prime directive, and I thought about it in a religious context. Okay, so you have all these different denominations and religions, what have you. Now, if my world religion class memory serves me, that Buddhism does not Buddhism just absorbs, and it doesn't reject. So it can absorb all those different concepts, all those different policies, and proceed. I'm putting it in a religious framework, but it can be in a more political framework as well, and it can absorb. So you can absorb the policies of the USSR, or you can absorb the policies of the CCP, and you can absorb all these and exist. And then from that absorption, then you get the overriding prime directive, or where the consensus, that agreed upon consensus of how we govern based on everything that we agreed to below, if that makes sense.
So I wanted to say, like, would it be governed like, how like we have federal government? Would we like basically kind of like get rid of a federal government and have, like you said, that everybody's different from state to state, and like different sides of the state? Would each state have its own sort of governance, and then like a main protocol being like the federal government, like a layer 1 and then the layer 2? I yield the rest of my time.
Sorry, answering some comments that were underneath the space. Though, please, Sierra, feel free to jump in, and then for hire.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Meta. You can continue on your train of thought.
Was he still speaking? Am I right?
That's okay. It's all right.
The congressman yielded his time.
Yeah, I yield the rest of my. Well, what I wanted to say was, is this going to basically kind of like abolish the power of a federal government? But I guess the federal government would be like some sort of mainnet where there'd be like a layer two would be like the states. You know, they would have their own like individual AI protocol where like they could decide them. I guess depending on state to state, that will be the governance of that state. You know, like their laws that they have now. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like how geographically would we break down governance? And
Yeah.
this is where like my I guess roots are really going to show, because when I picture this type of governance, I think about it in hexes rather than geographical boundaries as we like currently know them. So I don't, excuse me, know how many people are familiar with like hex maps, but you can vary the resolution. So like how geographically large the hex is, and I think that would be or should be predetermined based more on like natural land resources and access to resource. But these are just my daydreams.
Right. I think it'd probably be like that anyways. But thanks so much, Sierra, if you wanted to say your thing.
Oh no, that was my thing.
Death,
I yield.
Awesome. You yield the rest of your time, Congresswoman. AI Congresswoman? No, I mean augmented intelligence. I'm not sure it was first Death, if it was for hire. I mean, I guess I didn't hear anything from. I was gonna call you Mustache, Mustaco, Mutasco.
What's up with you, man?
Hey man, it's not all about XRP. Mr. Death. I feel like that guy was telling. Remember, was that guy? The guy with the glasses was telling him, "Do you yield the rest of your time?" And then like the other one said, "Do you yield the rest of the time?" It's like, "To you, yes." I don't know if you guys saw that.
I'm sorry. I was just writing a comment again. Take the reins, Meta. No, I'm just kidding. For hire, you had your hand up, and Mutasco. I'm so glad you're here, man, because this thought of putting governance in the title today and talking about these different autonomous systems that we could replace not only politicians but government and governance with was I did the title really for you and Sierra today. But for hire, please go ahead, man.
Yeah, I guess I don't see what the question earlier, but I'd like about. I still say looking at things as we see them now, like the federal government and things like that. I think it doesn't matter, and as technology comes online and we're implementing it, we're not going to be doing things the old way. But I think we need to think locally and mostly like local bodies and your own community, and just work out from there. I mean, if it's necessary to have a national election or something, it's just to me it's like a more fluid thing, like I think Sierra was saying, fluid democracy, to where it just ebbs and flows and grows as big as it needs to be in the moment, and then shrinks back down to you making your own decisions and delegating your decisions as necessary. And if it does come to the point where we have to have a national decision, we do have a reason for war or something, so I'm trying to think of something else, it's national, that or a bigger body of people need to make a decision, then that will arise in the time, but then just shrink back down to as small as it needs to be.
I mean, do we have reasons for war exactly? I don't know.
Typically, wars are fought over either land or disagreements about things involving people on land. So, it's questionable, right? Although, it comes down to resources. If I have nothing and you have many and you don't want to give me resources, I mean, I have all the utmost reason to want to do whatever I can to get those resources. I want to survive. So it is it's something that's definitely not been easy for our species over the course of history, as far as we see it, at least written. But Nonetheless, I think this is more just logistical issues as today exist, at least.
And it's a cover for failed financial infrastructure. It's a distraction. It's a way to explain away what really is the root cause, which is a predatory governance, right? And so you can hide a lot of things under the guise of war.
Cover your failures. I got you.
As a very good observation, KJ. Mutasco, man, you got your hand up. Please feel free to jump in.
Hey, Defringer. So my point, I wanted to comment, I had a deep thought on the conversation yesterday about universal basic income. And one of the things that I thought about, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of, what do you call it, hidden work, invisible work, or whatever it's called. So I grew up in a village, right, in Ghana specifically. And one of the things that I've learned moving out of the village into a more dense city was that some of the things that I was raised within the cluster of communities that I lived in that was considered work was different when I moved 8 hours away from the village into a city. Now, as I grew and went to school and did work and all that, and then ended up in the United States, right? One of the things that gets me is I always go back to the roots, because my mom, dad, they haven't been to school, right? But they're engaged in productive activity that kept the family intact. All I can visualize is work that my mom did just to make sure that I went to school, I ate, whatever. And, I'm the first of 6 kids, right? And so for me, it's almost like a conflict. When you live in a society, because we always have these conversations, but what we really talked about, yesterday I was talking about the covenants of if let's say the welfare state, and if you're given welfare benefits, it's almost like you're curtailed from, for example, if you got into an affordable housing program, maybe you got in cheap and the cost of that house is low, the market rate is set to the extent that even if within the community that you live in, because some of these plots of land that get sold to developers, they end up kind of depending on the city's rules. A developer may be constrained to just build a certain class of homes because you can't do that. You have to mix it. And when you mix it, you have somebody who gets into an affordable housing unit, and next neighbor home is valued at maybe 50% more, but you're capped because of the condition that you're put in, right? So I was more focused on the restrictive conditions of what, like you said, the Earned Income Credit Program and all of these different programs that we have currently, and thinking about what UBI would mean and its implications. Now, as I process it deeply, I was thinking about the concept that I just explained about invisible work, right? So I do work, and who made up that story about if you get paid for what you do, that is work? Because again, I have 2 kids and my wife, and my wife is a teacher. But every day, and I'm sure most of you go through this as well, right? The amount of work that we coordinate to do, right, it's insane. But I always look at the part of the work that I do, right? Although culturally, I don't agree with the more advanced industrial system and concept of work. The conflict exists within my own household that what is this invisible work that my wife does that is not considered paid work? So as I was thinking about it yesterday, I was like, okay, if somebody earns an income, right? Should society stigmatize that person because, quote, what they do is not considered work, right? That's a conflict that arose in my mind after yesterday, that I was thinking about it. I'm like, this may require more work. I have a friend who lives in Alaska, and they have what they call the Alaska Permanent Fund Dividend Program. This has been in there for I don't know, for a while, over, I don't know, maybe 30 years. I don't remember. But this PFD program, in fact, some researchers actually, and the reason why I'm saying this is a lot of people have made an argument against UBI. And there's already stigma, there's already all kinds of opinions around the fact that, well, this is going to create a problem where people will no longer want to work, right? But what they forget to look at is what I just said about the invisible work and who rewards the invisible work, right? And so think about that program. And I think some of the research work that was done on the Permanent Fund Dividend Program was that it actually didn't have any material impact on work per se, right? Because they did the research, they assessed it. And if you live in Alaska, this is money you get out of, like, I think it's true oil reserve royalties that are earned. You can check me on that. But it's almost like an experiment that currently exists. And is it effective? Maybe we could borrow from that. Like, how do we scale this at a national level? And who needs to roll out that experiment to help redefine what it means, and who gets the cost, right? So it's a little bit complicated.
Well,
hey,
before can I jump in on one thing? Yeah. And I love where you're going with this. What it takes, and I think the one thing that a lot of people that are pro, I don't care if you're pro UBI or against it, but you can't do it when you're running this extreme deficit. And that's the one thing that I love about this conversation of creating more efficiency and having an autonomous government that works for us, because the only reason Alaska is able to share profit from their natural resource is because they're not spending more than they make as a government locally or state. So I would love for government to shrink, and then I think back to Sierra's HEX idea, then each region has the ability to run itself like a profitable line of business, and then it's a no-brainer to help cover some of this invisible work that keeps society humming along. But sorry to interrupt, Natasha. I just wanted to mention that the reason Alaska is able to do it is because they make more than they spend.
Exactly. Yeah. And even Mutaska, take maybe this thought into when we're talking about these kind of changes in the structure of the way that the governance could be done of what is so societally acceptable, right? And going back to maybe even the town, right? If somebody wanted to build a whole bunch of units and they wanted to ask some sort of rule change that could benefit the town itself, right? The village, and make it more valuable, make it more attractive, much easier if it was like a distributed system of people who could make a vote on that change rather than a single individual maybe in that position.
No, I like the point KJ just made, because I wasn't even thinking about it. This is why this engaging, interactive conversations are important, right? I wasn't even thinking about that aspect of Alaska that, like you said. And interestingly, what you just said, right? If you think of it, there's always this conflict. And as we speak right now, there's a bill that is in Congress, which is the stablecoin, I think it's stablecoin something bill, right? And I think it was a congressperson, his name is Richie Torres. He was speaking on Laura Shin's podcast, and he made a comment. And the comment was, I think one of the sticking point, for some reason the bill got stuck. It didn't get the committee vote for some reason, and there was this ranking member, which is, I think it's Maxine Waters, that had some communication with White House and the politics, right? And the sticking point there was the Fed is saying that they don't want states to regulate issuers of stablecoin. And again, you can go dig deeper onto this. I'm just using this to explain a point. The point I'm trying to connect there is this. To your point earlier about how do we make this possible so that states can run efficiently, right? Not being, chained with this federal budget like that is blowing out of proportion. And I'm thinking about it and saying, what example do we have today? Again, this could be controversial, but I'm going to use it as an example. USDT just published their attestation report, right? In the attestation report, you can look at, okay, it could be debatable to say, well, the attestation report is now audited, whatever, whoever, right? That's not the point I'm making. Follow me here quickly. If you look between the amount, again, the stable coin is backed 100%. That's what they claim. That's not the point. But they were able to show in the attestation report that out of, I think, $86.5 billion in assets, they have $83 billion in, I think, liabilities. So the difference between that, they have an excess. And as of last year, that excess moved from 2.4 billion to 3 billion. Now, that is excess on top of the backed reserve. I'm just using this as like to contextualize into this conversation that if this experiment of the stable coin and if we have states independently issuing this power for institutions and companies to do their own stable coins without the Federal Reserve, coming into it, right? Do we see a path forward where we can have what you just said, KJ, about states being independent and being able to balance their own budget and run programs that could help the people within the state to benefit on certain things that may not conflict with the federal budget? And is it even a feasible experiment, right? Because these things work, but there are nuances to how these things can be rolled out. And sometimes incentives and interest gets in the way, which is what we're watching right now with this technology and how regulators and legislators would figure out how this becomes a more scalable technology for everyone to benefit. It's just kind of interesting to me. I literally just picked up that thought about stablecoin, but if we have to talk about it, we can dissect it in different angles. I just felt like it was interesting to see that a private entity is able to run, right? Because if you pick a bank and you say, well, this is, they run the fractional reserve system, yet they're still doing well, and there's this hidden basket of off-balance sheet assets that nobody gets to audit. They're the only people that know what's going on behind the scenes, even if they're bad loans, nobody knows, right? And they all feed into the federal system, which is through the Fed, the OCC, and everybody, right? So they're all kind of married together. And then all we hear is the regular guys like me, we're debating on, okay, is government efficient or not? And these guys are in bed together and they're figuring out how they can continue to extract value out of everyone else. And all we do is we debate on the things that they throw out, which is the red meat. And I shut up. It's just frustrating. It's interesting, but it's also, we're at a point where this technology could give us that opportunity to literally go the other way, right? But we're getting the fight, and the fight is not going to stop. Kind of interesting.
You're very right, Mutasco. The fight is in an opposition of the incumbents who sit in the positions that we want to have replaced. And I love everything you said. I think it was articulated extremely well. And I am very happy that you came back to the space today, because I think that's some of the most important things you said, right? The nuances on the way that these types of systems are implemented, and the most significant factor of the way that they can be implemented is those incumbents who would sit in the positions to make it malicious and nefarious and use it in the wrong means. and this is something that slow course of due time, unfortunately, because it's just the way the political systems work, and especially our country, unless there were to be some sort of extreme civil unrest, which I don't particularly see happening. I think it'll take some time, but they will be replaced.
I just want to ask Matasco, how does the CBDC work in that environment? How does that what role does that play if the stable coin is like one-to-one and does there really exist a need for the CBDC?
I think on CBDC there are two different things, right? The stable coin, as you rightly said, is backed one-to-one, which is what the requirement is for establishing a stable coin. But the CBDCs is literally like, I think the answer to your question goes back to, if you look up what the major banks, their response to the 40-page report that the Fed released on stablecoin experimentation kind of speaks to what they're against, right? So they don't see the relevance of it because they made, I would consider a self-interested point on why the Fed should not even proceed with a CBDC. So this whole idea of a CBDC is still kind of hanging in the air. I think they may be pressured to move one way or the other because of the global engagements of every other central bank that is literally trying to figure it out, right? So the force is more like they're probably figuring out ways to curtail everyone else, which I don't think is practical. But to your point, the CBDCs, then there's this guy, the president of the, I don't remember the head of the banking institution somewhere in the US. He made a really important case about why it's a little bit complicated when it comes to CBDCs. I forgot his name, but there's, if you want to look at the pushback from all of the top banks, right? They made a really good case on why CBDCs are not relevant. And that could give you an idea of like where we're going to stand from here in terms of where it actually goes. Because these top banks are actually, they exist. The Fed exists because of them, right? So there's this connected relationship. So I don't think that big banks will say something for the Fed to ignore and just move on and do whatever they want. So however long that takes, we're just going to have to wait and see.
I think Sierra had her hand up.
Yes, she did, Meta. Thank you very much. And that was an interesting response, Matasco. Sierra, though, if you would like to speak, please feel free to. And then Dr. Jordan Peterson, parody account, if you would like to speak after Sierra, welcome up.
I was going to say.
Thank you. I put my hand down because I lost my mojo. I don't want to change the vibe of the room because we were kind of talking more about monetary incentive or structure. But I had some fleeting thoughts that I guess I'll touch on, and if they're of any interest to anyone, we can expand on them. Going back to a few comments ago, more about the how would we break down governance on like a geographical level. And I think Death mentioned running more akin to industry and businesses, which made me think profit. If we make the areas profitable and less reliant on existing governmental systems, which like I think lowest barrier to entry there would be like easing off of the power grid and getting areas to be more self-reliant through things like virtual power plants where we are actually generating value for the area that is profitable while also removing our need for reliance on existing government systems. Like that's a thing that is being piloted today. Virtual power plants in closed loop communities where you can use solar panels to charge power walls that then kick in when your solar is not ideal anymore. And you can even, I think Tesla does this, don't quote me on that. I'm not shilling Tesla right now, but there are so many different governmental incentive programs right now at both state and federal levels for grid flexibility, anything that is easing the grid burden, that you can actually, like if you were to charge your power wall, you could sell that energy back to, I guess, various third-party independent like electrical providers. But virtual power plants and grid sharing is a thing that exists today and is attainable, but obviously needs some sort of initial investment.
Well said. And Jordan, Dr. Jordan Peterson may have dropped on us. But Freeman, welcome up. I haven't seen you in the space before. I'm gonna close the space up. I'm gonna do it at 5:30 today, 5:35 maybe if we go a couple minutes after. But I have not seen you in the space before, so if you would like to speak on any of the things that we've talked about, or if you want to change the subject, please feel free.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Well, thank you for bringing me to the stage. There's so many things, interesting things you guys spoken about, but I would like to ask about the title. So, like, I find, so I understand part of it. I know AI, governance, UBI, those are amazing things. Quantum makes my head hurt. It's like, based on evidence, but it's like so confusing for everyone. What are the last four? Like, I don't understand. DLT, XRLP, LPDID. If someone could explain, please.
Yeah, so DLT is distributed ledger technology, which just refers to different types of blockchain technology that exist today, right? Or in reality, right? Just the ability to have a distributed ledger, and then in this case, it could either be private or public, immutable. There's a lot of different varieties. The XRP ledger is a particular blockchain that I have been a community part of for many years now. And a type of methodology for validation of the transactions that could occur on a blockchain for the form of payments that I believe is extremely not only technologically advanced but applicable in a decentralized situation for our species long term. The interledger protocol, which is probably one of the most useful tools that I have above there today, right? The Interledger protocol was a protocol built by a company called Ripple and gifted and adopted by the W3C in 2015. The best way to describe it is it's comparable to how you would think of something like an your HTTPS, right? How there is a standard on which the governance of systems of information distribution occur on the internet. The Interledger protocol is a protocol that allows atomic distribution of information in the form of packets from one sender to a receiver. And so you could do this in payments or information.
Do you mind? So the thing is, I'm kind of bad at economics, and like I don't really know what the ledger is. Like, if you could like describe it a bit, what it does, because I didn't understand most of what you said, because you mentioned ledger multiple times, but I don't know what a ledger is.
So a ledger is a tool that we've had humanity for thousands of years, historically context. It's as simple as a piece of paper that has important information written on it that has been saved, right? And so a ledger is, in this case, distributed ledger technology, is that same type of format, right? A format where information has been stored but distributed over multiple sources.
I always think about that move with the guy's old lady mom, like she has everything, all the payments written down in her book. Remember that mafia movie? I got it all here,
And that could be thought of as a ledger as well. Yeah, correct. Like your checkbook is also, right, it's another ledger.
So, a question, is ledger like tied to the concept of money, or it can be a ledger about anything? Like, can it log any type of data, or it has to be about storing money and like where they transferred?
I mean, a ledger in general could be anything. Yeah, I mean, it's really just information storage. You could even have a ledger as they used to have ledgers as rock tablets, right? And we would write something on that tablet, and that would be technically considered a ledger as well.
Just like the documenting of payments, right, or transactions from left to right. Who owes who and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it was the first ledger documentation of a transaction is like I don't know, something like 1,300 years old. It was some king paying somebody else or something for something that was written down. I don't have it off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Freeman, is it okay if we go to Mutasco real quick because he put his hand up, and then I'll go back to you? Thank you, man. Mutasco, though, go ahead, man.
No, I'll be quick. So the thing that came to my thoughts as we're talking about AI displacements of jobs and what that implication is, I was thinking about it yesterday about the concept of, I don't even know if it's a concept, it just popped out of my head, like on-demand work stream model. So it's inspired by my thought around work currently. I've heard people talk about this idea that, oh, sometimes I get to do my work. So the work day is 8 hours, but some people get to execute their work less than 8 hours. Maybe 2 hours they're done, and they're only warming up the seat, right, for the rest of the day. So from the angle of, efficiency and impact, there's this idea, and I think it was Goldman Sachs. They were looking at kind of leveraging AI. And I think most of you are aware of this, where they kind of mapped out. So in an IPO, there's different tasks that gets done before a deal is closed. Like Ripple is going to IPO, you have the roadshow, you have private public roadshow, you have, underwriters, you have all this stuff, right, before the bank gets involved. This is all activities that may be able to be delegated to a machine. So Goldman Sachs model showed that at least they mapped out for a single IPO, there's over 127 steps before a deal is reached. Now, their experimentation was that what out of this, the number of steps that they've itemized could be delegated to a machine. They found out more than half of those steps could be delegated. Now, the feedback that most of these managers, and these are people they're not like the people that most people claim AI is going to displace their job. These are people that are high earners, like investment managers, bankers, whatever, right? These are the top. And these same people said that the number of hours, and I think if you pick up an occupation, let's say you're a manager of human resource or you're a VP of whatever, you're an engineer, pick up the occupation and break it down to the task level, and then replicate the tasks in hours. And if, for example, we're using the Goldman Sachs experiment on AI, and we find out that these are the number of hours that we could actually get back, could the concept of on-demand work stream be feasible? Because then if that model exists and somebody spins off a model where you're no longer tied to a company, right? We're in an AI-enabled environment where you're no longer tied to a company. If you can get it done in 2 hours, you could literally sign up for another job, but it's a marketplace that allows you to execute the same work, right? You're an engineer or you're whatever, it's the same work. So you're free, you're no longer chained, right? And forget about the benefits and all that, right? Because that's all things that just keeps you in the box, right? So if you think of the overall benefit, because people could maybe spend more time with their kids, do more valuable work, or whatever that is, right? So the thinking of AI and displacement of work sometimes can sound scary, but if you look at it on another aspect, who will be disadvantaged enough on the institutional level to not see this as a feasible way forward, right?
That's a hell of a concept, because if you think about it like hash rate, you're equating talent, intellectual capital, experience, expertise. You're enabling that to fluidly move where it's needed. To me, it's a win-win, because if you think about, I don't know, you're Microsoft and you're doing the next Xbox console. I don't know why that's coming top of mind, but you need that initial infusion of additional brain power, talent, and skill. Hiring is expensive, it's slow. That's a really cool concept. I question the how, but I'm bullish on something like that coming to fruition in our lifetimes.
Right, and I love about it, especially when I've been talking about in long-term time horizons, but I mean, Mataspa, you've brought up great concepts that can be utilized today, right, with the efficiencies of the tools that we have available. And so, I mean, it really excites me that we talk about this stuff, this information in here. I know I say it at the beginning of every space, but this will be so important, not only today, but I think even 50 to hundreds of years in the future, this information will be able to be looked back at as an audio file. And I think representations of thought can be taken from this and still put into an aspect of that society at that moment of time. And maybe some people will look back and a thought like UBI, or right, or just a basic respect of understanding that all of us deserve at least food, water, shelter, and a means of working towards society in an efficient and empathetic, loving way. And they go back and they go like, oh my gosh, that society didn't exist. Like, what were they doing? Oh, they must have just been still monkeys. It was our prehistoric times, right? I mean, this is interesting to say right today, but it could be a thought 500 years from the future from now when we're looked back at. I'm up at the end of the space time for myself. If there's any closing thoughts from anybody in the audience or speaker panel, please, if you guys would like to speak right now, I'll give another 2 to 5 minutes and I'll close it up. Go ahead, For Hire. Thank you, man.
I just want to thank everybody. This was awesome, and you for allowing me to speak and share myself. This is awesome. Thank you.
Just echoing Borjai's sentiments, and Death, you kind of answered one of my, not rhetorical questions even, but I just was thinking out loud to myself, like, I wonder if these conversations do create a ripple or a butterfly effect, and I think you would agree with me that there's very likely that potential. So I appreciate everyone sharing their wisdom, their daydreams, but I feel like we're moving closer to dreams becoming more reality than we can possibly imagine if we turn the right corners together.
Very well said, KJ. And on that note, I will thank everyone once again. Thank you guys for coming. I have been rate limited lately. Unfortunately, I send way too many messages out from this account. So I'm going to say thank you all today for those who came up to speak and those who may not be in the space at the moment. I love you guys, and we will be back Thursday, 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to keep it relative topics. I might bring in a little bit of Evernode hook sidechain on Thursday and do a little bit more technical talk, but still on the relative base of governance and these different distributed systems of information. Have a good night, everybody.